I'm going to ask you if you would to turn with me to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1. And we're going to be reading through several verses in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes was written by King David's son, Solomon. Now, if you know anything about the story of Solomon, you know that Solomon was King David's son. King David was eventually delivered Israel from the hands of the Philistines and all the other enemies. When Solomon took the throne after David, Israel was at its greatest apex. Israel was at peace. Isn't it great, though, that Solomon, at this time, Solomon was actually born out of sin? I mean, everybody knows the story of David and Bathsheba, right? And yet Solomon was David and Bathsheba's son. So even conceived in sin, it shows us the grace of God. But Solomon's now an old man. And he's writing this book. This is sort of his benediction. Last writings. He wrote a lot of the Proverbs. He wrote the Song of Solomon. He was wise, and he writes these words in Ecclesiastes 1, 16 through 18 as he comes to the end of his life. Solomon says, I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. What is it in life that you would like to accomplish? You ever think about it? I think probably if I asked you here and took a poll and I said, what is it that you would want the most out of this life? I have a feeling that probably the majority of us would say, you know what, I'd just like to be happy, man. I just want to be happy, right? And, you know, we think that happiness and this contentment is just right out there. It's just so close we can almost taste it, right? I mean, we think, well, just as soon as I graduate high school, Jasmine, then I'll be happy. As soon as I graduate college, then I'll be happy. Well, as soon as I get that right girl or that right guy, then I'll be happy. As soon as I get married, man, then I'll be happy. You know, I'll be happy when I have my kids, you know, and kind of get settled when I get that career. You know what would really make me happy is that new car. Man, then I would be happy if I could just have that new car, you know. And it seems like that happiness and contentment is just right there, just beyond my grasp. I remember vividly when I was around 12 years old, I was sitting on the back of my aunt's, in the back of her house on the patio, and I had my cousin was there with me. Sophia's here with me. Sophia, you like your cousins? Every kid loves their cousins, man. Right? Just a part of it. So I was sitting back there with my cousin. We was about 12 years old, and man, we was thinking and just dreaming. And I said, man, you know what? I can't wait till I'm 13. When I'm 13, I'm going to be a teenager. Man, mama's going to let me stay up past 9 o'clock. Man, when I get 13, man, things are just going to be so much better. And then when I turned 13, I thought, you know what? When I turn 16, then I'm going to be happy, man, because when I turn 16, I'm going to be able to get my driver's license. I'm going to be able to go wherever I want to, do whatever I want to do. When I turn 16, then I'm going to be happy. Then I'm going to have it made. Then I turned 16, I went, wow. Man, when I turn 18, then mom and daddy can't tell me what to do anymore. When I turn 18, then I'm going to be a man. And I can get out of the house, and I can go to college. I can do whatever I want to do. I can make my own choices. I can stay up as late as I want to. I can go to bed when I want to. I can eat when I want to. And many of you have seen I've done that since that time. I can do whatever I want to when I'm 18. Oh, man, when I turned 18, I can't wait till I'm 21. Man, when I'm 21, then I'll be happy. When I'm 21, I'll really be an adult. Then I'll have graduated college. I can get married. I can start having my family, have my kids. I can get established in a career when I turn 21. Man, but when I turn 30, you see, I will be established in my career. I'll have a house bought. I'll have my car probably paid for, hopefully, and I'll have a wife, and I'll be starting my family. Man, when I turn 30, then I will be happy. I cannot wait until I turn 30. Then you turn 30 and you go, well, I'm still the little boy. I'm still the kid here at work. Man, when I turn 40, then I will really be established, man. Then I will have my kids raised pretty much, or they'll be on their way. I'll no longer have to be changing diapers. Man, when I turn 40, I will have arrived. I will be so happy when I turn 40. Then you turn 40 and you go, man, I wish I was 12. Right? Man, it's always elusive, isn't it? When are we going to arrive? When are we going to finally get it? We want it. No, we all want it. What is it? What is it that we're looking for? What is it? This guy named Paul David Hewson was an Irish singer, a songwriter, philanthropist, activist, a venture capitalist, a businessman, an actor, a multimillionaire, possibly a billionaire, world famous. Everybody knows him, right? Everybody's heard of Paul David Hewson. Well, maybe not, because he goes by a stage name Bono from YouTube. Bono, at the apex of his career in 1987, wrote a song that climbed to the top of the charts. Here he was, good looking, had all the women, had all the money, was in a great rock band, and he wrote this song. He wrote, I've climbed the highest mountains, I've run through the fields, I have crawled, I've scaled the city walls, I've kissed the honey lips, and I've felt the healing in the fingertips that burn like fire, this burning desire. I've spoke with the tongue of angels, and I've held the hand of the devil. It was warm in the night, I was cold as a stone, and everybody knows the chorus, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for. You feel like that? I still haven't found it. Solomon was looking for it. What is it? I still haven't found it. I'm an old man, and I still haven't found it. Solomon looked back on his life. He looked at all the things that he had accomplished. He looked at all the things that he had. And yet he says, it's chasing after wind. It's emptiness. It's vanity. And over again, the Bible uses throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon uses this phrase, everything that I thought I wanted, I found that it was vanity, that it was emptiness, that it was simply chasing the wind. In other words, what's chasing the wind? What does he mean? He keeps saying that 7 times. He says that, chasing the wind. What does that mean? He means every time I try to grab it, it eludes me. It's always elusive. I never quite arrive. That tomorrow never really comes at the end of his life. I mean, he had begun well, right? I mean, he was chosen by God to be the next king after his father. He had everything that a person could have in this lifetime. He had power, he had position, he had prosperity, he had great wisdom, all the gifts that God could give him to show him that he loved him. Yet despite these gifts, something was missing. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like something's missing? You didn't get something, you missed something. And I think that's why a lot of us use drugs and drink. That's why a lot of us escape with pornography and sex. That's why a lot of us numb ourselves with television, even politics, even church, looking for significance. I think we have a world of people today that will follow anybody if it gives them some meaning to their life, some significance to their life. They'll jump on any cause, even if the cause is ridiculous, because they want to be a part of something. They think, I still haven't found it. Maybe if I get involved in this, maybe my life will have significance and meaning. Solomon looked for it in power. Look in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 22 through verse 27, it says, Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of the finest flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, 20 pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. For he ruled over all the kingdoms of the west of the Euphrates River. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for chariot horses and 12,000 horses. The district governors, each in his own month, supplied provisions for Solomon and all who came to the king's table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also brought to the proper place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and for the other horses. So what's it saying here? At this point, Solomon was the most powerful man in the world. All the governors, all the other kingdoms bowed down to him. They fed his horses. He ruled the world. Ruled it all, had the power, all the power a person could have in the world. Not only that, he had the popularity. In 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, it says he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. Talking about a rock star. Top 10 every week. All these platinum records. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grew out of the walls. He spoke about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. He was very educated. Had a doctorate. From all the nations, people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who heard his wisdom. Man, even the Queen of Sheba came to check him out. Solomon had it all. And yet Solomon, at the end of his life, looks back and says, it's all empty, it's vain, it's chasing after the wind. I still haven't found it. He had all the popularity, all the power, and all the power and popularity always leads to possessions and prosperity, doesn't it? Man, he had that. Everything that he could possibly want, servants, anything, offered to him simply at his command. Don't you think your life would be great? Don't you think you'd really be happy if you only won the lottery? I mean, seriously. What if you won the multi-million-dollar lottery, Donald? Don't you think life would be happy then, man? That's all you need, man, just some money, you know? If I could just get me some money. Do you know that lottery winners, that almost half of them lose their entire fortune within just a few years? That 70% of those who win the lottery end up broke shortly after? That lottery winners report unwarranted pressure to support others after they win their money. They're more likely to be robbed, scammed, and murdered. You become a target for lawsuits. You lose your friends. Your family fights over your money, and it divides families. The majority, this is from a poll, Google it. The majority experience deep depression after the shine wears off. And many times, if not most times, it leads to infidelity and divorce. Here's what Solomon said about his riches. Look what he says in Ecclesiastes 2, verse 4 through 9. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well. The delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Yet I still haven't found it. I still haven't found it. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. You see, because the problem with prosperity and possessions is that it always breeds an appetite for more. You ever notice that? The more you got, the more you want. It always does. I remember when I was going to high school, people used to make fun of my little vehicle, my Ranchero. I had I used to call it a baby poop green Ranchero. I used to drive to school. If you don't know what a Ranchero is, it's a car truck. We used to call it a crook. Anyway, that thing was ugly, had Bondo all over it, man. I said, man, you know what? One of these days, man, I'm going to get me a nice car. So I upgraded. My senior year in high school, about to go to college, I upgraded, Samantha. I got a Pinto. Got rid of that Ranchero and I got me a Ford Pinto, man. Stick shift, didn't have no air conditioning, just roll down the window kind of thing. And man, for 4 years I drove that Ford Pinto to college. Ain't worth that. It cost me $500 for that Pinto. Uncle Gene helped me find it. So I drove that Ford Pinto to college back and forth for 4 years, and I thought, man, one of these days, that Ford Pinto was dirty, nasty. I mean, it was always filthy, and I thought, you know what, I'm not washing this thing, man. I don't care about this thing. It just gets me where I'm going to go. But one of these days, I'm going to get me a nice car, and when I get me a nice car, man, I'll have arrived, and I'll have it. I'll be happy when I get me a nice car. So finally, I graduated college, and I went and bought me a Firebird with T-tops. And I love those lights, how they flipped up. And man, I got home with that car and I waxed that car. I washed and waxed that car. I cleaned that car. I vacuumed that car. And for about 2 weeks, man, that car was spotless. And about a month into it, it's just as dirty as that Pinto. Because it still didn't satisfy. Still didn't satisfy. Solomon looked for it in pleasure. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 10 and 11 says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Folks, you know what the Bible says about Solomon in Kings chapter 11, verse 3? It says Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. 700 wives and 300 lovers. Now that's just, they were at his beck and call. That is 1,000 women, Ronnie. 1,000 women. Now I kind of figured up some stuff last night. Let's see, 365 days a year. If Deb was one of my 1,000 women, I could see her today, and then I would say as I was leaving, I hope you had a good time. I'll see you in about 3 years. If you saw a different woman every day, it would take you 2.7 years to cycle through them. That's if you saw one every day. You thought you were a stud muffin. Solomon, 1,000 women, just there for one reason: pleasure. And Solomon says of himself, there was nothing that I saw. If I wanted it, I got it. I took it. All the pleasure I could want. It seemed like Solomon had it all. A king, rich beyond measure, a household name throughout the world, any pleasure he wanted, any drug, any wine, the hottest women. What more could he want? But still, it eluded him. Still didn't have it. Still couldn't find what he was looking for. Solomon begins the book of Ecclesiastes. The words of the teacher, says the David, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Wow. How could a man who had so much say everything is meaningless? He was wealthy, smart, powerful, sexy, seductive, and yet empty. He'd be given everything a man could want, but was empty inside. We see that now, don't we? Rock stars on drugs, blowing their brains out. Actors hanging themselves. Still not finding what they're looking for, thinking that they finally arrived. Thinking if only I can achieve this. But once they achieve it, they find that it's eluding them. Solomon, now an old man, he looks back over his life. And he says, I want to be your teacher. He said, and the whole book of Ecclesiastes is writing to this point. It's coming to this apex right here. The whole book, as you read it over and over again, the theme is everything I've done, everything that I have. It's always striving after win. It's empty. It's meaningless. You guys remember that. You remember when you saw that woman that you married to? Woman, you saw that man? You thought, if I could only have her, then I'll be happy. Now you're going, if I could only get rid of her. If I could only get rid of that joker. Doesn't bring happiness, does it? Doesn't last. The experience, the shine wears off. Solomon says, I want to be your teacher. I want to be your teacher. I want you to look at my experiences and I want to relate them to you. You see, because sometimes you might say experience is the best teacher, but experience many times requires too high of a tuition. It costs you too much to go through the experience. I'm looking at people today that's been through the experience. Trust me, I don't have to use your math to know what it's like because I've listened to you. Right? I don't have to try it to know where it leads because I can learn from other people's experience. I don't have to experience it myself. And Solomon says, here, you can listen to me. Let me be your teacher. And he says in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13 and 14, he says, now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Solomon says this as he concludes. He says, I've had it all. and everything's meaningless. And this is the one thing I've learned. This is the only thing that matters. Fear God and do what he says. That's it. He says everything else is chasing after wind. Everything else is meaningless. Everything else is vanity. What does that mean, fear God? That means respect God. Just try to honor him. Just try to have a relationship with him. And just try to do the next right thing. Try to do what he says. Are you going to fail? Are you going to fall? Yes, but get back up and move on. Keep walking with God. Try to do that. He says that is the only thing in life that has any fulfillment at all. Why? Because, people, you were not meant for this world. This world will never fulfill you. We understand that the world only creates in us a longing for something more. It never really satisfies. No matter what we get, the shine wears off. It tarnishes. Everything ruins in this world. Everything corrupts in this world. We look for justice. We keep thinking, well, the next president or the next government or the next job or this is going to finally make things right. And it doesn't. It doesn't make it right. There's nothing in this life that fulfills because God created a void in you that can only be filled by him. That's it. Now, most of you are going to walk out of here and you're going to forget all about this sermon within a day. And you're going to keep on striving after wind. You're going to keep on chasing after the wind. You're going to look at it. You're going to try to be popular. You're going to try to make more money. And you're going to try to hope for tomorrow. And you're going to try to do all these things to try to find your self-fulfillment. And you're going to be left as an old man like Solomon, empty inside. Empty. You were not created for this world, but you were created for another world. The world cannot give us the water that we're thirsty for. The world cannot give us the bread we crave to eat. The Bible says in Romans 8:22, it says, 8:22 through 25, we know the whole creation has been groaning as in pains of childbirth up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what we already have? But we hope for what we do not yet have. We wait for it patiently. What's Paul saying? He's saying that inwardly we're going to groan as long as we live in this body. We're going to crave. We're going to thirst as long as we're in this body. But we're craving and thirsting for something that's beyond. We're craving and thirsting for a home that we've not yet arrived. You see, Solomon had prosperity and power and prestige and passion. But there's one thing Solomon didn't have. He didn't have peace. He didn't have peace. I think the world can give you a counterfeit to just about anything, but the world cannot give you peace. I wonder how many of you in here today have peace. You see, because peace is what we need. You can be the richest man in the world, the most powerful man in the world, the sexiest man in the world, and if you do not have peace, nothing else matters. You see, there comes a time when we realize that in this world, we will never get it. We will never get it. It's not there. It's not in this world. It's elusive. It's like chasing after the wind. It's just always out of our grasp. It's never going to get there. We're never going to get it. And we must realize that you are not really meant for this world. I found this, that even in dysfunctional families, people who come from dysfunctional families, they know what it means to have when you talk about home. About a home. I remember there was people in my neighborhood, and I used to drive by their house. And every time I drove by their house, I would look in, and their house just seemed so warm inside because I knew the love that they had for one another inside that house. And I thought, man, I wish I was a part of that family. I wish I could go in that home and live there. I think all of us crave a home, don't we? A place where we're safe. We all have this idea of home, one day being home. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 13 through 16 says this. It says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised, but they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would not have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they are longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has a city for them. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. We all know, I suspect, what it feels like to be exiles, to long for a home where we know we belong. We sense sometimes deep in our truest selves that we most authentically are meant to be somewhere else. I find myself, says Lewis, I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy. The most probable explanation is that I was meant for another world. You see, this is not your home, Christian. This is not the place where you're ever going to be satisfied. You're never going to arrive here. You're never going to get it. You see, what is it that you really want? What is it that you're hungry for? Jesus is the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life. What is it that you're thirsty for? Jesus is the living water. He is the answer to all your questions. He is the answer to all your desires. In Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30, it says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I think of the prodigal son. I think of him who went to his father and decided to travel into the far country, and he took his inheritance. And in that far country, he tried to find it. He tried to find what he needed to fill that void in his life. And while he was there, he spent it on riotous living. He spent it on drugs and alcohol and partying and women. And finally his money ran out. But he was a young man, right? He could make more money. Problem is, he didn't realize that there was a famine in the land. There was a depression. There was no jobs to be had. There was no way for him to replenish his income. So he was broke. And when he was broke, he decided that he could hook himself up with this pig farmer. Now, Jews and pigs didn't get along anyway. They were unclean animals, and so a Jewish boy working in a pig farm was like the lowest place he could go. So he's working with this pig farmer, and his only pay was, you can eat the slop that the pigs are eating. That's what you can get. And so this young boy, he's now out there and he's eating this slop. He's down there and he's trying to take this slop here and he's putting it up in his mouth. But the husks, the corn husks that are mixed in with that slop, he can't even digest it. And he's so hungry. He's in such pain. And I can imagine there's that time that he comes over to this watering trough and he bends down to wash his muddy face. And as he begins to wash his face, wash that slop from his face, I can imagine that reflection of himself coming back to him from that pool of water. And the Bible puts it this way. It says he came to himself. This young man now looks at himself and he sees himself and he says, my Father at my home. Man, his servants eat better than his. His servants have a roof over their head. They have clothes on their back. If only I could go home. And you know the story. He eventually gets up out of that pig pen and he begins to travel home. And the father rushes to meet him. I want to ask you a question today. Have you been in the pig pen long enough? Have you been searching in the far country long enough? Are you ready to come home? Are you tired of being tired? Are you sick of chasing after wind and striving after things that never fulfill? Are you ready to come home? Jesus is the answer. I'm going to ask if you would to stand with me. As every head bowed and every eye closed, we're going to have a prayer, then we're going to have a quick invitation. I'm going to invite you to respond. But today, if you're tired, sick and tired, you feel like your life's meaningless, you feel like you're just striving after wind, Jesus is the answer. And the Father's standing there waiting on you to come up out of that pig pen and come home. It's time today to commit our lives to Christ, maybe for the first time. For others of you, you've just been in the far country too long, and it's time to come home. So